This CoinPod is sponsored by America's Card Room, an online gaming service that supports over 60 different cryptocurrencies. CoinPod listeners who create an account with America's Card Room can use the code BTC100, that's BTC100, to redeem a bonus of 100% of the initial amount you deposit to your Card Room account. For more information, visit americascardroom.com and start playing today. Thanks for tuning in to episode 3 of The CoinPod, a podcast for learning about Bitcoin from Bitcoin. That is, from anyone, anywhere in the world actively using, building, researching, or otherwise contributing to the development of Bitcoin. It's now February 20th, and with Bitcoin hopping around the high 10,000s, low 11,000s, there's good reason to think that the great Bitcoin crash of 2018 is well behind us. But my guest for this CoinPod joins me to explain that, irrespective of the day-to-day price, there's a multitude of reasons to be more bullish about Bitcoin than ever. And he should know, he's been around Bitcoin since day one. He goes by Exiled Surfer on Twitter and almost everywhere else on the internet, and even though he didn't necessarily take Bitcoin completely seriously from day one, he soon changed his mind and has been a hardcore Bitcoiner ever since. Our conversation touches on a dozen or so different aspects of Bitcoin as it stands in 2018, so buckle up and prepare yourself for an extra long CoinPod, chock full of top-notch Bitcoin commentary. Here is Exiled Surfer. Thanks so much for coming on the show today. Would you mind giving us a quick intro to when Bitcoin first came on your radar, how you first got involved, and some of the things you're doing in Bitcoin right now?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I was on the P2P Foundation mailing list, and was pretty much, right when Satoshi posted the white paper. I read it and went, okay, interesting idea, and forgot about it. It was one of a number of things I was paying attention to at the time. That's by 2009, 2010. I was kind of into different stuff at that time. It was, I guess I was just involved in a lot of privacy things and a lot of cypherpunk and cyberpunk stuff and hacker culture and all those things. So I was paying attention to a lot of stuff when the paper came out, and so it was just one of the things that passed across my consciousness, and then a lot of different things started happening. WikiLeaks started happening, and the Arab Spring and Anonymous and all of those things. It was a pretty heady time, up until 2011, and so I guess I started paying more attention to Bitcoin when WikiLeaks was blockaded by PayPal and MasterCard and everything. And in our local hackerspace in Vienna, all the people in there were talking about it, and we had miners running in the hackerspace, and had discussions and arguments about using power that nobody was paying for to turn into Bitcoins and stuff like that. So I think I installed the software. I installed Bitcoin D, Bitcoin QT, around 2011, I guess, was the first time I started paying attention to it a little bit closer and gathering some. And then in late 2012, 2013, I had the chance to become the system administrator for the Bitcoin Foundation, and that was really interesting. That was, so December. And the first week that I started with the Bitcoin Foundation was basically when Mt. Gox was happening. And this is a really funny thing, actually. So I guess the Bitcoin that I got paid in when I was working at the Bitcoin Foundation was, you can pretty much say it was, Richard Vare's Bitcoin. Because he was pretty much the major donator to the Bitcoin Foundation at the beginning. So at that time, I got to know all the people that were involved in the Bitcoin Foundation at that time. That's Peter Vasinis and John Matonis, who had actually brought me on board. When John brought me on board, he came through Vienna, and we handshook our deal, and then he flew off to Switzerland to talk to Swift about Bitcoin back then. And, and then Charlie Schrems was also a board member of the Bitcoin Foundation. Then that whole thing happened with him. And so it was a pretty interesting time. Mark Karpeles held the domains were registered for the Bitcoin Foundation by Mark Karpeles, and so Roger had flown down to Tokyo to get the passwords so that Gavin could could sign the binaries for the next release of the Bitcoin Foundation, because at that time he was the chief scientist of the Bitcoin Foundation. So in that 2-year period of time is where I pretty much earned most of my Bitcoin, working for the Bitcoin Foundation and doing that stuff, setting up the membership portal and working together with Michael Gulski and some other people to get that all functioning. And it was pretty much about that time that I started, only getting paid in Bitcoin. And by being involved with the Bitcoin Foundation, then that was kind of like a pretty visible place then. And it was easy then for other clients that I was doing things with to say, okay, well, you got to pay me in Bitcoin. So that that's kind of like how I got into Bitcoin. But I always thought that, so when Occupy Wall Street was happening, it was pretty clear to me that Bitcoin was pretty much what Occupy Wall Street was talking about in a financial sense, in code, in how it is that you could actually replace the banking and financial structure as it was. And so I think I wrote that, I tweeted that numerous times during that time, that Bitcoin was Occupy Wall Street in code. Yeah, but here's the interesting thing. So when I was working at the Bitcoin Foundation, that was the scaling debate was happening, on the Bitcoin Foundation's forums, and also on RBTC and on Reddit and stuff. And so like these arguments, and all the people that we see now with the split between BCH and BTC, these are old conflicts and old discussions that really go back to pretty much all of the early adopters have been having this scaling debate and what Satoshi's original vision was or is, and you can find all that stuff really if you look into the archives on the Bitcoin Foundation in the forums. All these arguments go back way. Oliver Jansen and Amir Taki and all these people, they were all there at that time, and when that all imploded, everybody else went their own different ways. But same thing with Jeff Garzik and all these people were all there discussing and arguing about this stuff. And so SegWit is actually taken so long to get to the point where it's actually available now. I mean, these discussions, and Lightning Network also. I mean, we were talking about the SegWit and the Lightning Network really inside of the foundation when we were looking at all the scaling problems and stuff. And Patrick Merck, the lawyer that was pretty much responsible for most of those things. Marco Santori was there. A lot of people. Conrad Graf as well. This is how it is that you and I started talking, right? Because I noticed that you were paying attention to Conrad. Conrad was also involved in the Bitcoin Foundation, which is where it is I got a chance to know him. So going back all that way, if you want to look at these things, in 2014, here it is, we are in 2018. It took 3-4 years for SegWit and Lightning to actually get coded and to get implemented and tested and everything. And this was always what was really frustrating to me in the debate that we've seen happening in the last year, and people putting down SegWit and putting down Lightning and watching Bitcoin Cash get launched and all of these things, is that very, very few people understand how long this stuff has taken to actually get coded and get implemented. It takes a lot of work. Yeah. People say, okay, it's code and it's computers. Hey, we can do this stuff in 2 weeks. Hey, look, we got an ICO. It's out in a month, But actually to do, to get consensus what it is that's going to be done, to specify something and talk about the ideas and then go through the testing and everything. It's been a long road to get to where it is that we're at right now. And this is why it is that I'm so bullish about Bitcoin, is because I'm pretty conscious of how long these technologies and these software solutions have been being discussed and being coded, and now we're seeing implementation.
So I first started cutting my teeth on Bitcoin in early 2014, when I sort of had no comprehension that all of these discussions were going on when I first learned about it. And here we are entering the 10th year of Bitcoin, and as we were chatting before this episode, we are more bullish than ever. Me only having been in it for a couple years, but you having sort of been there from the very beginning. Not sort of the very beginning, but from the very beginning. And so
I didn't really take it seriously right at the beginning. I have to admit, I watched a lot of my friends, playing around with this thing. Oh, now it's $1. Oh, now it's $3. Should I sell? It's really funny to look back at that and think, wow, we all have those stories about I could have, right?
Yeah. So one reason why a lot of people are bullish about Bitcoin is from a regulatory standpoint. The Senate hearing with the SEC Chairman Clayton and the CFTC Chairman Giancarlo has sparked a lot of bullish sentiment among some people who follow these sorts of things in Bitcoin. Does this play into your bullish sentiment at all, or do you just see it as an interesting footnote of little to no concern, or what's your takeaway on U.S. regulation specifically, but also international? Obviously, every country has a unique stance regulatory towards Bitcoin, but it's definitely the focus of a lot of cutting-edge regulation in international and national domains across the world. So how does all of this play into your bullish sentiment, if at all?
Well, I guess we can talk about this in a number of different ways with a number of different points. I've said from the beginning that Bitcoin can't be regulated, that it can only be regulated at the on and off ramps. So where the legacy financial system or any legacy technology interfaces with it, and that's where regulation can take place. That falls into the idea of, you can't ban prostitution, you can't ban drugs, you can't ban, weapons handle. These are things that have been around since the beginning of time, and governments have never been able to actually ban them. They can make them illegal, but making something illegal doesn't mean that people who have a use for something aren't going to still do it under the possibility of the penalty of a government's monopoly on force. Okay, so I'd like to start from that point, that I don't think that you can actually regulate Bitcoin. So I'm bullish on Bitcoin regardless of whether it is that there's any positive or negative regulation at the edges. Okay, so let's be clear. Bitcoin can and should be regulated at the edges of the network, where it interfaces with the legacy systems. Secondly, I think that that people are always talking about governability, and this is the other debate that we see a lot in the Bitcoin space. Is that people want to have a governance structure, and I've always been a proponent of the idea that governance equals capture, no matter where it is that it happens. So you can start look at America is the perfect example, right? We have this division of the legislative, the judiciary, and the executive, right? And it's been captured, right, by corporate interests and or political machinations. So it's only 250 years old, and here it is that we're in multiple constitutional crises in America, which nobody even takes seriously, which would have torn the nation apart 50 or 100 years ago, right? So I like to use that as an example, or any government, as an example that governance eventually leads to capture. That at some point, if there's a structure, that no matter how the voting is set up, no matter how well-intentioned it is to set up a way of making consensus, and in determining consensus, no matter what the voting is, no matter if you use Robert's Rules of Order for debate, or no matter if you have, the way it works in the Congress and the Senate, with filibusters, whatever. At some point, it always leads to capture by special interests. Okay, so these sort of things never really entered into my attitude towards being bullish about Bitcoin, because I think that if we use, I never can figure out how to pronounce it in my head, Beautyton, Beation, right? One of the most vocal people in the space. We're talking about, factual mathematics here that were set up in a way to make Bitcoin essentially ungovernable, so that it can't be captured. The major ideas are about, Sybil attacks, 51%, and people are making the arguments now that 5 mining groups altogether own 71% of the Bitcoin network, and all that you have to do is have a phone call between the 5 of them, and everybody's Bitcoins are gone. And these are all like very, very naive arguments, because there's not an incentive for them to actually do that, because it's like killing the golden goose that laid the golden egg, right? Yeah. Okay, so that being said, as an underpinning of my basic position, I'm very happy to see that that the regulatory environment is turning out to be very, very positive towards Bitcoin. I did expect that to happen because, in my belief, Bitcoin and the software that it's built upon and the ideas that are built upon are the only way that governments can survive, actually. It's literally the only way that they can get out from under the ownership of the debt-based banking system that our legacy banking is using. Okay, so we get into the ideas of deflationary currency here. We get into a lot of different things that we don't necessarily need to dive deeper into in this conversation. But I thought that it was inevitable that there would be a positive regulatory environment towards Bitcoin, because it's the only option. You can only turn off the whole world's internet, right, to potentially, slow down the technology. But even that wouldn't happen. When you look at how Blockstream has launched the satellites, when you look at people who are talking about, who are updating the blockchain over radio waves. I mean, this is hacker culture. This is cat and mouse security games. People fail to understand when they first get involved with Bitcoin about how old all of these ideas are. We're talking, these are like underpinnings from cyberpunk and cypherpunk ideas, right? And that's why Satoshi published his paper at the P2P Foundation, was the first place we put it, because this is where all the geek minds were, and he didn't really do anything new other than put together existing things to use them in a unique way, right? And there we come back to Adam Back, and his history in these ideas, and we get to people like Nick Szabo, right? I mean, these people have been talking about these ideas here for since the early 90s. This is 20, 25-year-old ideas that are finally finding their place in the expression of Bitcoin, right? And so these are some of the smartest people on the planet, right? That's what I think is so awesome about Bitcoin, right? Is it's just an ongoing education. You're surrounded by and encouraged and can discuss with, some of the smartest people on the planet, right? So, in terms of regulation, it was an inevitability that things were going to be positive, because you can't turn the thing off. But I'm still heartened to see it, right? And it's good that America is leading the way, but they're not really. I mean, Switzerland, right, who are some of the most conservative people on the planet financially, right? And I live in Austria, which is next door neighbor to Switzerland. They've been on this for a long time, right? We have all the ICO based first generation crypto companies that are based in Zug. That's where Ethereum did their foundation. There's Bitcoin. You can pay with Bitcoin in every train station in Switzerland. Switzerland has been, creating or gathering their own little amount of Bitcoin for at least, I would say, 3 years solidly. That they've been adding to their reserves, and so America is literally behind Switzerland in that sense, and Switzerland is very conservative. So if you're aware of anything that was happening in Switzerland and watching all these things from a legal perspective, it's pretty clear that eventually regulators would have to create a positive environment, essentially for their own survival. And I think also one of the reasons why we're seeing a positive regulatory environment is that there's not really too many new ways to create wealth, right? And literally Bitcoin created this $500 billion worth of wealth over, in a 10-year period of time. $500 billion of wealth just based on ideas, okay? And we're still just at the beginning. So we're at the end of the petrodollar. We're at the end of the petroleum century of growth. Governments, for how much we dislike them and how idiotic they seem to be in a lot of places, are very good at perpetuating their own survival, right? And anything that can come along and actually increase economic growth, the people aren't stupid, and they're watching very closely what's going on. So we're in early stages. We have early models, and I think it's conducive for the state of the planet without getting too environmentalist, without getting too you're right. One planet, one people, and all these things, and all the conflicts that we have going on. I think too often we assume that everybody that's in government is stupid, and
sure.
and actually they're not.
Sure, I 100% agree, and plenty of my friends who introduced me to Bitcoin take a hard line, sort of anarcho-capitalist perspective on Bitcoin and government, and think, similar to what you just said, that governments are stupid, and I sort of wholesale reject that idea. I think from a very basic level, obviously the natural response to something that threatens a system you have in place or threatens you directly is adaptation, not capitulation or ignorance or something. So it only makes sense.
I think the point that I'm trying to make is I think that these systems are actually a lot less a threat to business as usual, rather they're their savior.
Interesting, because maybe you are familiar with some comments made by some of the individuals who, like Michael Goldstein and Pierre Richard. They say Bitcoin threatens the Federal Reserve or directly competes with the Federal Reserve. Is that sort of an idea you don't wholesale agree with, or you think it's actually more of a complement or a savior to existing systems?
I adore both of those guys.
Sure.
Okay, let me say that, right? I adore Pierre and I adore Michael, and I'm involved in the Keybase Nakamoto Institute, team. I think I was the seventh person in there or something. And there's good conversations that go on in there. I think I want to be really careful how I say this. Yeah. I think that Pierre and Michael are young. I'm 55. I'm 55. Okay, so I'm kind of an old geezer. I studied international politics and international economics at university is what I did. I actually wanted to be a diplomat with my life, and I ended up just being a deadbeat surfer. But I think that they're smart kids, and I think they're a little bit young, and I think that it's easy to be taken up by the either the libertarian or the anarchist ideas. I guess what I'm trying to say is that extremism or maximalism in any form is not really something that I've learned over the last 30 years is really conducive to moving things forward. I think that the world is a little bit more complicated, and those views are a little bit too simplistic. Yeah. I can't say that I agree that that Bitcoin threatens the Fed. I think that Bitcoin can become a tool of the Fed. I'm more worried about it actually becoming co-opted by the Fed and by the by legacy systems than I am by them toppling. I think it's really naive to believe that this thing is going to actually just change everything. I think that history shows us that it's a little bit more of adaptation, and I would guess that I would expect that Bitcoin's a little bit closer to Christianity than it is to anarchism, and closer to Christianity in the sense that Christianity has survived so long because it picked things up along the way, and adapted and brought things from existing systems, social and cultural and belief systems, into its own structure. Okay, and so you can look at the Catholic Church as being this monolithic, thing that nobody can beat, but it's gotten where it got to because it adapted and it brought other influences into it. And so I would expect that Bitcoin is going to do the same thing. Yeah. Now, it's not going to happen quickly, right? You see how long it takes for us to build consensus, and if this is where I come back to the fork between Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin. It's really interesting, watching all the people, arguing about this stuff, and you say, okay, but you look at the market, and Bitcoin Cash has got basically 15% of the value, between 10 and 20% of the value of Bitcoin is what the market values it at since the split, and it's been pretty consistent. And that means that there can be a place for Bitcoin Cash with its legacy, shared history of transactions, and with people who are holding coins on both forks, and with the people who are getting new mined coins. It's like, pretty much like a religious schism, right?
Yeah.
in its sense, right?
Yeah.
So I'd like to come back to what I'm saying about the Fed, about whether it's a threat to the Fed. No, I don't think that Bitcoin is a threat to the federal banking system, nor do I think it's a threat to the world economic system. I think what it is it's carving out its own place as an instrument for doing multiple things, which is a store of value or a transfer of value, or as a notarization of any kind of instrument, be it property or identity or whatever, for being a settlement layer. And the fact of the matter is that for the last, 4 or 5 years, people have been actively working towards making, second level solutions that allow for, larger transaction throughput. And Bitcoin is more than likely a settlement layer. And the reason I'm bullish about Bitcoin is because the basis of the technology says that eventually people are going to be fighting over Satoshis. You're going to need a Satoshi to be able to settle your corporate record to the ledger, to the most secure ledger that is shared transparently across borders. Yeah? And I think that it's going to be in the interest of countries and in legacy financial institutions, legacy governmental structures, to be using the mother of all change to have a settled idea on what a contemporary idea of the truth is. This did not happen. This did not happen after this time stamp, basically, right? So no, I don't think it is a threat to the Fed. I think it's going to become a tool of financial planning for countries and for legacy financial institutions, would be the short answer.
No, the long answer is great too. I appreciate all of that. You mentioned, you referenced Bitcoin sort of offhand as the mother of all chains, though, and I'm curious if you are bullish in any way, or what your opinion is in general, I guess, on other chains, other coins, who try and do a lot of interesting things, and in a sense, obviously compete with Bitcoin. Do you think all these other coins have a place in Bitcoin, a Bitcoin-involved economy, or not so much, sort of just doing cool things that maybe can be co-opted into Bitcoin in the future, but have no long-term relevance? What's your take?
I think that there will be coins and technological implementations, whether they're forks or they're newly written, that do have a use case and do have a place in the economy or in governance. I do not think any of them will ever replace Bitcoin. I don't think that because if you're basically trying to outcompete Bitcoin, which has the largest network effect and which has the most secure network, one which can always, through a slow process, implement any innovation in its code base. So if there's anything that's better, the incentive will be for people to implement it in Bitcoin because Bitcoin has the network effect. That doesn't mean that there can't be other chains. I think that we are looking into a future where we're looking at thousands or millions of chains, and that's where whether it's EOS or it's Garzik's multi-chain project. I mean, none of these ideas are new. It took a while to write a code base for them over the last years. These things have been getting discussed on mailing lists for years. Okay, so I like Ethereum because it's move fast, break it, change it, whatever. I think that this huge infrastructure that Consensus has built up around Ethereum is absolutely amazing and stunning to watch. You have this huge economy that is motivating people to write code, do startups, do all of these things, and we can come back here now to regulation. We can come back to what it is that was said last week, which is basically, no, we're not going to be banning anything, but we're going to be paying attention, and you guys need to stop doing scams. All right, you need to just pay attention that we have hundreds and thousands of years of history that we've codified into law, which is to protect consumers, from snake oil salesmen and, get rich quick schemes. And so I'm quite happy to have seen the last year of ICO mania, right? Because there are people who did use this method of funding to create code bases for products. And I guess one of my favorite examples is status.im, right? Which is what did they raise, 100 or 150 million? But I mean, they have a huge development team, and they've been coding away, and they're very smart kids, and they're making basically an operating system, a mobile operating system for Ethereum, and Ethereum's not going to go away. We're going to see a lot of volatility. Not going to sure what's going to happen with proof of stake, if they're actually going to move to proof of stake. I'm not so sure, but they might do it. It's not all solved yet. And if they do go to proof of stake, what they do is they secure the place for ETC, classic, right? That is maintain the legacy chain, right? So all of these things are really interesting, and we're going to watch all of this stuff shake out. And I think that there will be multiple chains which go through this process of fire and testing and scamming and all of the different influences that we have, and that will survive. I don't think any of them will surpass or replace Bitcoin. I just don't think that's going to happen. And I do think that we're going to see, federal coins, right? We're getting these sovereign coins, the sovereign wealth fund ideas, like with Petro, from Venezuela, which is really funny, which is a bunch of gobbledygook. Right? Yeah. But yes, I do think that we're going to see sovereign coins that are linked with countries, and that will transfer over the Bitcoin blockchain, and whose state will be registered to the Bitcoin blockchain. I think that any federal coins that we see, or any or any other chains that we see will eventually be registering their state to Bitcoin, which is why I call it the mother of all chains, right? So there'll be a hash of the state of your network, right, at every block, and you're not storing the whole state of your chain on Bitcoin, but you're going to be storing a hash of the state. And eventually we're going to see in the cloud where you're going to be able to navigate, all of these multiple blockchains. There's going to be services that are providing, hashed, verifiable versions of chain state. I don't think that we're going to be moving into a future where it's always going to be the whole chain. There's going to be solutions that make things faster and stuff like that, because the market is going to demand it. There's how many billions of transactions are happening between humans every hour, okay? And so there's going to have to be methods of delivering or creating, delivering, and verifying the state of the multiple chains and multiple networks. And I think that Bitcoin will eventually be playing that role. And that's why I'm bullish about Bitcoin, because of the technology, because eventually, Ford is going to be paying, $1,500 for one Satoshi to register their corporate report on the Bitcoin blockchain, right?
I mean, I 100% agree with your bullishness, and I think sort of cross-chain verification aside, one development, which, as you've mentioned, has sort of been in discussion for several years, that's just now sort of starting to roll out, although maybe that's a little bit overselling it, but certainly people are, I'm referencing the Lightning Network. People are sort of already running Lightning nodes, even though some of the developers have said running it on mainnet is distracting from our work on testnet, where we're still trying, there's a lot of work to be done still. But Lightning Network is a huge development for transacting, or for increasing the amount of transactions that are put through, as well as anonymity and a whole host of other attributes. Can you chat with us a little bit about Lightning, maybe when it first sort of came on the scene and all of these archive debates and that sort of thing, and where you see it, how you see it developing as maybe just one of a variety of scaling solutions that we'll eventually encounter, and how it plays a role in Bitcoin's future?
Well, I don't really like talking about Lightning as a scaling solution. Okay, it's a second layer. It's a second layer solution, which allows basically escrowing of funds. Okay, that are eventually settled at a point of determination by the players or the users of the network onto the Bitcoin blockchain. So it doesn't really scale the Bitcoin blockchain at all, right? It just allows for people to have a version of trustless third-party so without third-party transactions, okay? Now, I think what's interesting about Lightning is that it will allow large hubs to develop, like Coinbase. We will have multiple versions of large hubs that are very, very simple for the average user to use, and there's an incentive in the system, obviously, to have a hub. Here's the thing: this is already happening in banking. Okay, pretty much every bank already has instantaneous transfer of funds here in Europe between customers of an individual bank. It's when the banks have to settle up with each other that they start charging money. But right now, it doesn't really matter which bank you have in Austria. They have an application where you can, you run on your phone and you have a costless, immediate peer-to-peer transfer inside of the bank. Okay, and so Lightning is going to essentially duplicate this in a cryptographic sense, that you can have instantaneous payment. I think it's going to be really interesting now when you look at Square, okay, with Cash. I think is really, really amazing. And we're going to have to talk about credit cards, right? How in this aspect as well. So I think that Lightning is going to be an incredibly huge driver of usability for Bitcoin, for the micropayment level that people are talking about. And look at you, and you got to think about these ideas like the Brave browser, and you got to look at things like Steemit and these other chains. So we're back to the area of which coins, which change, SIA, Filecoin, IPFS. Okay, these are all I'm really excited about Filecoin and IPFS, by the way, as well. I think that's another amazing team. Juan Benet is just a really, really sharp guy. He's been around for a long time. To go back to whether we're going to have multiple chains or not, but Lightning is going to, basically can be implemented on any coin, on any chain, right? So what happens when some smart ICO implements Lightning with a chat client, and then we can say, okay, is this something that Status is going to be doing? I don't know. I have no knowledge, but I could expect that they would be smart enough to do something like that. I think the competition actually is just things like all of the messaging clients that are implementing P2P payments now. Whether it's WhatsApp is running a test in Indonesia or something, right? Okay, so Apple Pay and iMessage and all of these things. So to get to the point, what Lightning is going to enable is another chain or another coin paired together with messaging clients that already exist. Eventually, you're going to see these existing legacy systems that are innovating, that are going to come together with the innovations that are happening with the Lightning Network. Okay, and somebody's going to get smart, and somebody's going to implement it. And they'll use Bitcoin. I wish Twitter would do it. To be honest, but it's only one of many second layer and third layer and maybe even fourth layer solutions that are going to be stepping down the level of trustless, verifiable transactioning that can be done between people. I don't think we're going to ever get away from third parties. But the fact of the matter is that Bitcoin will offer anybody who wants to not have to trust a third party, but to verify. Yeah, and you'd be able to do that with Lightning just as well as you can with Bitcoin. Yeah.
Sure. Do you think, though, running a Lightning node, like you mentioned, Coinbase or something else, for example, running a large node like that, do you think the obvious security risks of such a large node provide a strong enough disincentive to keep the network sort of full of small to medium-sized nodes, or do you envision a lot of large Lightning nodes sort of popping up?
No, I think that we're going to see a few large hubs that have a brand name and have a brand trust. There's already people, and this is why people are running on the mainnet now and not on the testnet, is they're already building up their credibility and their client base. Yeah. So, the way it is that I understand the Lightning Network is that it's pretty hard for people to steal funds because you have to post a bond essentially, right? And there's the incentives. So we're going to see these things get tested. Does this actually work or not? If Lightning doesn't work, the next one will be even better than Lightning because it'll be based on the lessons learned by Lightning. Yeah. But I always think that all of them are going to come back to the mother of all chains. So I am a maximalist in that sense. So no, I don't think we're only going to see large hubs. We will see some, and you pay attention to Preston Byrne as well, and I'm sure you see how it is that I poke him.
I'm still not 100% sure what his view on Bitcoin is.
Preston's one of the most important people to actually follow in the space, I think, because he's not afraid to be a contrarian, and he's very smart. He's a very, very smart guy. I think that deep in his heart that Preston is pro Bitcoin. And doesn't like seeing all this shit happening around it, like a lot of people, and takes a very, very let's say artistic presence in how it is that he goes about arguing against the things that he doesn't like seeing happen in the space. Yeah, I think he's very, very valuable to us in that sense. But I think that Bitcoin is very near and dear to Preston's heart. You got to read between the lines to see that. Okay. Right.
How do you, share some of your thoughts on credit cards and how you see that sort of tool in a Bitcoin future.
Okay, so actually what I wanted to talk about with credit cards was the fact that they're starting to charge a premium to purchase Bitcoin, because it's just like, give them enough rope, Go ahead. Yeah. So, okay, if you want to pay a premium to buy into Bitcoin through your credit card, you should be able to do it, and the bank should be able to and payment processors should be able to charge a premium on it if you're stupid enough to want to get into the network. The reason I'm positive about that is because what it does is it just incentivizes the hooks with the existing legacy system to be utilizing Bitcoin, right? Okay, so it's good for everybody. They have, payment processors and banks now have clues that the government's not going to ban this stuff, and they just want to see people do KYC and AML, and they'll be doing that again at the edges of the Bitcoin network. Okay, but there's always on-ramps and off-ramps out of Bitcoin that don't go through these legacy systems, that don't demand the KYC and AML data if you want to maintain your anonymity or your privacy. You can go, you can move on into the network via Monero, and from Monero into Bitcoin, and back out. We can also start talking about the decentralized exchanges here that are coming up. I think I saw a message from Roman Snitko from Hodl Hodl that he was going to sleep today, and he's going to launch Hodl Hodl, which has been also working on a test net for, like the last 5 or 6 months. And then you have something like Bisq, which used to be called BitSquare, also based here in Vienna. Chris Beams, shout out to Chris if you listen to the podcast. So Bisq, I think, is really amazing because their volume is going up. All of these, if another exchange crashes, the decentralized exchanges are what we're going to be hearing more and more and more about in 2018. I think that's going to be the big discussion point is how decentralized exchanges are allowing people to move on and off of Bitcoin. Every time an exchange has gone down or been hacked, local Bitcoin traffic goes up, right? And you got to remember, this used to be the only way that you could get Bitcoin, right? You either got it from a faucet, right? There was no exchanges, and then came Mt. Gox, right? And everybody was there because it was there. Nobody else was doing it yet. But local Bitcoins is also, there's a huge amount of volume that happens there. It's like, and it's sexy too for people. You like meet somebody on the internet. It's like an internet sex date, and you go and you like exchange, your fiat for your Bitcoin. So many people, it's the first way that they actually got involved with Bitcoin was over local Bitcoins. So with solutions like decentralized exchange solutions that are coming on, I think there's 5 or 6 of them that are pretty close to actually launching right now with full technical infrastructure. But again, Bisq is not an exchange. It's just a piece of software that you run on your own computer. And what it is just an order matching book between people, and it has a 1 Bitcoin limit, right, for transactions. Okay, so you can't go above that. And what they do is they provide links to every possible way in the legacy financial system to actually move fiat into crypto. And that's why they're different from all the other decentralized exchanges, is because all the other decentralized exchanges are doing crypto to crypto. And Bisq is one of the few that's doing crypto to fiat and fiat to crypto. And the way that they do that is that they're essentially also an escrow service that puts it in to escrow for the time that it takes for the legacy system to transfer the fiat for the thing. So this is not something for trading, for hyperactive, day traders. This is for just your everyday person, okay, that wants to move in or out of crypto for whatever reason it is that they have it. So another reason why I'm bullish on Bitcoin. But in terms of what do I see with credit cards happening? Look at everybody's just so impatient. Actually, I think people are just a little bit too impatient. It's clear that these systems are going to grow together because they need each other. We have a far more superior and secure method of handshaking with each other than ever before. The solution of the Byzantine generals' problem, trustless exchange, okay? And there's no reason why it is that legacy financial institutions are not going to implement this technology. It's just going to take them a while. And there will be more agile competitors that will do it. Let's take Square, for example. God only knows what it is that they're going to do with their product and with their network that they've built out. And they were smart enough. I mean, they were one of the first the Bitcoin Foundation had a Square account because they were one of the first fiat on and off ramps, for doing membership stuff, And we did BitPay and we did Coinbase and we did Circle. I mean, that's what I did. That's what I implemented. Okay, at Bitcoin Foundation was the membership module, which allowed people to become a member of the Bitcoin Foundation.
Well, I want to talk about each of those, and now Robinhood is sort of joining the cadre too, because I completely agree when you said in 2018 and well beyond 2018, we'll see an increasing popularity in decentralized exchanges. The name of the Korean exchange that was just hacked a couple weeks ago is escaping me, but every time from MTGOX to now this exchange in Korea, every time one of them is hacked, I mean, well, in one sense, it blows my mind that it still happens, but I guess people sort of need time to continually develop an awareness that the point is not to trust something centralized like an exchange. But all of that aside, we see Coinbase finally implementing SegWit. We see Robinhood with over 1 million people waiting to use their cryptocurrency trading features. And like that number is sort of dwarfed by Coinbase's 10 million or something users and all of that. But the popularity of centralized exchanges doesn't seem to be losing pace right now. So do you think like we need to see 2 or 3 or a dozen more massive hacks and crashes before people sort of finally wake up and realize maybe a centralized exchange isn't the way to go?
So I would venture to say that companies like Coinbase and BitPay are not going to disappear, but they might become more and more irrelevant and not as competitive. They're going to have to find ways to service customers. Coinbase is obviously trying to move into a B2B position as well. Not only their B2C stuff, they've milked and they're still milking the transaction fee cow.
Yeah. To sort of wrap up, I want to ask your opinion. It's not a wrapping up question by any means, but I am curious to know your opinion on the idea that Bitcoin itself is just a tool, and the idea that it can somehow save people or lift them out of poverty or something like that. Do you see Bitcoin as playing a role in helping those people, or sort of not so much?
Yeah. Okay. This is where I'm like going. I'm going to preface this by saying I am a privileged white male. Okay. In a privileged white male patriarchy that needs to die, just needs to burn in hell. Okay. I recognize my privileged position on the planet. Okay. With that in mind, I think that these ideas and these arguments about saving the world's poor all come from exactly that position of privilege and patriarchy, and I find it to be incredibly arrogant and demeaning to actually say that these things are going to do that, because I don't think they're going to. And I've been very, very careful about mentioning this or getting into these arguments on Twitter, because I really just don't want to, get into the endless, discussions about it. But no, I don't think that it's going to save the poor people in poor countries, not in its current form. I think that what Bitcoin can enable is a more transparent and traceable creation and usage of money, and that over years and over decades and over time trickles down to that place. I hate banking the unbanked. This came up. So like when I did the first rebrand of the Bitcoin Foundation's website, this was very, very popular with certain people inside of the foundation, this whole like social corporate responsibility thing and banking the unbanked. Actually, I see it very, very differently. I think people should be unbanked. That's my favorite line about Bitcoin is unbanking the banked. One of the few people that talks about that is Vinay Gupta, leashless on Twitter. He sees that as in a similar vein that I do. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I certainly agree that a lot of I'll just speak for myself. I come into Bitcoin from a place of extreme privilege, being white, male, educated, from a reasonably affluent North American family, and I've traveled to several countries all around the world, most specifically Latin America, to Guatemala and Honduras and other countries, and it's just an extreme disconnect for me. Something that I'll say I don't necessarily agree. And maybe it's just my optimism and privilege, a combination of the two. I don't necessarily agree that Bitcoin can't help these people, but there's very much a disconnect between opening an account on Coinbase and, yes, financial freedom, fuck banks, and then I go to Guatemala and see people that have next to no social services whatsoever, drinking filthy water, and how is Bitcoin in some way supposed to help them in 2018? I just don't see how it's possible. So
that's exactly what I mean. Yeah, I think it's comes from a place of privilege, and I think that we're pretty arrogant, is what I'm trying to say. I think we live in a really insular filter bubble of very highly rarefied ideas and privileges. Yeah, and I really like watching it all, getting attacked and torn down and whatever, even though it takes away privileges that I have. I think there's many privileges that I've been able to grow up with, or that I use right now that other people should have too. And anything that takes away or democratizes the distribution of ideas and power and wealth, whether it's gender based or race based or faith based or anything, I want to see all those structures fall apart, and I don't think that anything is going to change until these structures that we are privileged by are weakened, and I think that Bitcoin does play a role in that. So my perspective is a lot more longer term about whether it is that it improves things for people. Yeah.
No, I agree. I think, or I should say, I hope that Bitcoin plays a more significant role in tearing down those structures than continuing to prop them up.
But I have much more interesting questions about things like okay, so how are we actually going to be doing taxation?
Sure. Well, Arizona just passed a bill that allowed their citizens to pay taxes in Bitcoin, and I hope more states follow their example.
Yeah, they will. I think they will. I think that we'll see that, and I mean, it's an incredibly, really seductive system that's been sent in motion, right? It's like once you get it, then you want to have more of it, and you want to hang on to it, and then you see other people having it, and you want to have it, and so there's all of this very, very subversive stuff happening, and so in that sense, I think that the end game is either Bitcoin is worth what's the current calculation for, so it's worth either, X million, right? Or it's worth zero. And I think that's very accurate, right? It's either going to be worth zero, it's going to be worth a lot, right? And because of its limited supply, there's going to have to be other chains and other coins based on the same principle that have fresh issuance that interface with Bitcoin. Yeah, Bitcoin cannot, and this is where I differ from the maximalists, Bitcoin cannot be the one and only currency that everybody is using for every purpose on the planet. But take the technology, start a new Genesis block with whatever the most current version of the code is, and interface it and settle it to Bitcoin. Those are the things that I think that we're going to be seeing. Yeah, and there will be innovations that come from other coins and other teams that will be implemented in future versions of Bitcoin consensus based software, and in new coins. Yeah, I just don't see anything being able to work any other way. I just can't wait for the whole system to collapse that we're living in right now. Yeah, and essentially because I'm tired of the war on the planet. I'm just tired of the whole paradigm of the post-industrial and post-World War II era with why don't we just give everybody all this? Why don't we just borrow and print money and give it to everybody so they don't have to fight for everything, rather than spending all the money to build more planes and guns and bombs and whatever. And it was just, all the economic calculations, and this is where Brett Scott is a really great guy, right? Is that, all the economic calculations of how much cheaper it would be for us to just feed everybody on the goddamn planet instead of killing each other, but we're locked into these other incentive structures and that are essentially going to collapse of their own inconsistencies, and I hope. So I think those things. I think that Bitcoin is not the cause of that. It's not contributing to it, but it is providing a method or a vehicle for those of us who see the way that things are and disagree with them to survive the period of time that it takes to go through this paradigm shift. But it's the best thing that we've got at the moment. It's the smartest. Yeah, and then we can get into all the scripting that's coming on, right? Okay, RSK Smart. Man, it's an endless education. That's the most exciting thing about Bitcoin. This is an endless education. You're just continually confronted with ideas and theories, and you have to be an eternal student. And like I mentioned multiple times my age in the podcast, and here it is. I feel like I'm at university and I'm a 21-year-old kid, and
yeah, it's simultaneously, for me at least, it's simultaneously the most exciting and also overwhelming aspect of it, because like you mentioned a couple minutes ago, buying Bitcoin is an incredibly seductive thing. It just, you see it, and then you have some, and you want more, and then you want more and more and more, and at the same time you are barraged with so much information. And for me, so I, similar to the education background you mentioned, I study politics and economics. I don't have a computer science or cryptographic background or anything like that, and so trying to penetrate this immense body of knowledge is a very exciting but also overwhelming task, but a task that I wouldn't want to replace with any other. So I share your excitement and bullishness, and I can't wait to see where Bitcoin takes us.
So let's do it. Yeah, let's talk price, right? So, where is it going to be? Yeah. So I think we're closing the year at 10x at the close of last year, 100 to 150 in December, and the low the low is 25. So it's anywhere between 25 and 150, I think, is possible at the end of this year. As I was kind of surprised to watch it go down to where it went down. This last month has been kind of like going, wow, man. And every week, good news coming out, like all of this like all the things that we've mentioned in the show over the last 3 weeks, it's been nothing but positive stuff coming out about Bitcoin. And you get up in the morning, and you're like, okay, what? It's gone down another 1,000? Wow, what the fuck? Has been where I'm at. So during that period, I thought that the floor was between 6,000 and 7,000 going to be, and that's what it looks like where the floor went to. What was the lowest it was at? 6,600 or 6,500, depending on where you looked. So now it's
something like that, I think,
going back up to that psychological barrier of 10 and whatever. But I don't think that we're going to go below 6 if it goes down again. I think that right now it's going to do the same thing. It's going to dance up to the 10K psychological border again, like it did right before Christmas. That was a very, very interesting time. My wife was like, "What? It was worth 8,000 yesterday. It's worth 9,000 a day." No, it's not worth 9,000 a day. It's worth 10. She's like, "What?" Yeah. No, I don't think we're going to go back, but I don't think we're going to go below 6 again this year. I don't see why.
Yeah, you never know. The two thoughts I always approach the price with is you never know, and even if you do know, it doesn't matter. Like, the price is the least interesting, least important thing about all this. I guess not entirely irrelevant, but in my opinion, pretty irrelevant. Yeah.
So, like I said, I earned my Bitcoin primarily between 200 and 1,000. So, but that being said, if we do go below, what do I think the true floor is? Where do I see the real floor if it really just like goes fucking haywire and just like crashes? I think the floor is somewhere between 1,200 and 2,000. I don't think it'll go anything lower than that, because there's a certain incentive, there's a certain cost in the system to creating them, and I think that I think that most people. Do you follow Nick Carter, by the way?
I do, yes.
Yeah, okay. Another one. Shout out to Nick, one of the smartest analysts in the branch yet to pay attention to, because he talks about price in a way that price is not important. Nick is a great analyst. He talks about things in the right way. Yeah. So floor 2,000, ceiling 150K for this year. Yeah, that's my and anywhere in between that is fine, because it doesn't really matter. It's all magic internet money.
Well, on that note, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. This has been a blast for me personally, and I know our listeners will enjoy it also when it's released. Your experience and the wisdom you can share, or you have shared, given how long you've been in this space, is invaluable to me personally and also to our listeners. So thank you so much. Are there any other final thoughts?
I appreciate that. I wanted to say that the reason that I came on the show is because, actually we've known each other very, very short period of time here, about 2 weeks. And I just scanned your timeline and we chatted a little bit back and forth. It's really great to see people like you entering into the space, and that's why I came on the show, because you're treading down the right path and paying attention to the right people and not letting yourself be distracted by all the craziness out there. You've got a good head on your shoulders, and I hope that other people can see that and also come on your show and support you and help you understand things more, and help the rest of us also get perspectives on different things. So I really appreciate the invitation as well.
Well, again, the pleasure is all mine. Thank you for chatting with me today. I want to be sure to encourage my listeners to follow @Exiled Surfer on Twitter to learn more from and about my guest today. And as always, follow @TheCoinPod to keep up with weekly podcasts. This episode of The Coin Pod has been a production of You, Me, and BTC. Special thanks to Dan Brown and Tim Baker, as well as my guest, Exiled Surfer. Please message me on Twitter with comments and questions about this Coin Pod or previous ones. We'll be back next week, so until then, cheers.